All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 4F formula, how to find, fund, fix, and flip businesses for profit. And we're on 2F. 2F is the fund part of it. And this is the bit that I think it's fair to say the business buyer who doesn't have any experience really gets their knickers in a twist around that because they feel that it's this huge elephant in the room. They're trying to avoid it, trying to ignore it, but everyone knows that it's there. How do you pay for this business? Well, yesterday we talked about how to find the business, and now we're talking about how to pay for the business. Funding the business is really just the smart way of saying how do we pay for the business. So I have got 10 methodologies. Is it 10? No, it's not 10. It's six. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 methodologies. 7 methodologies to fund the acquisition of the business. I will tell you my preferences as we go along. I'll tell you which are the easiest to do. And I will tell you the ones that take a little bit extra work to do. So make sure you've got your pads and your pens. Let's get started. So method number 1 is something that we call asset finance. And asset finance is provided by specialist asset finance lenders who typically only work through intermediaries, third parties, i.e. finance brokers. So I have on my deal team a finance broker who I actually have 2. So across the 2 of them, I can access whatever finance is available at the moment. So asset finance is really exactly what it says on the tin. You are going to finance assets. Whose assets? Well, the assets of the business that you are buying. Now, what is an asset? An asset is typically something with a serial number. Not always, but typically something with a serial number. So computers are assets, machinery assets, forklift trucks are assets, lorries are assets, buses are assets, vehicles are assets. And the asset finance lenders use the asset as their security. So if you don't pay the loan back, so if you default, they repossess the asset because they have a charge over the asset. They repossess the asset and they can sell the asset to get their money back. Now, in order to be able to sell the asset to get their money back, they only will lend up to a certain percentage of the value of the asset because they have to allow for a depreciation of the asset and the fact that they are going to be selling it in a fire sale scenario because they do not want to own the asset. They want to get their money back. So there are different qualities of assets. If the asset is stealable and unidentifiable, for example, scaffolding, you can get asset finance on scaffolding, but you've got to shop around. If it's vehicles, very easy to get asset finance on vehicles. Now, obviously, some assets already have finance on them. So you might not be able to place finance on those assets if the finance is up to a certain loan to value level. But if it's a very low loan to value, then you could replace the old finance with the new finance, a little bit like remortgaging a house. You pay off the old mortgage, you've got the new mortgage, and anything in between is yours. So asset finance only works for acquiring businesses with fixed assets that are rated good assets by the asset lender. And typically you'll be going to 75% of the asset value. Occasionally it's more than that, but usually it's that sort of loan to value. Now, when you buy a business using asset finance, you are effectively doing what private equity has always done. And the origins of private equity in the United States back in the 1960s were all about placing finance on the assets of businesses in order to buy the business. And there is a very enjoyable and entertaining book called Barbarians at the Gate. It was made into a movie for TV, which is it's on YouTube, Barbarians at the Gate, all about the acquisition of companies using asset finance. And in the story of Barbarians at the Gate, it's billions of dollars of asset finance. So let me give you an example of asset-based finance. So let's say in this example, there is £500,000 worth of equipment. Now, I'm just choosing nice, round, easy numbers for the sake of the illustration, but quite clearly that could be £50,000. It could be £500,000. It could be £5 million. It doesn't really make a difference as to what the number is, but I'm just using this for the sake of the example. And let's say there's still some finance, as I said earlier, owed on this equipment of say £100,000, which means there's about £400,000 of equity in there. Obviously the difference between the finance owed and the value of the equipment. Now we can refinance this at £400,000. Now a point to make here is that the valuation of the assets is done by the asset valuer. They won't take your word for it. They won't take the seller's word for it. And they typically down value because it's also hedging their bets. So they'll only give you, in this case, 80% loan to value. That equipment value might be worth more like 600,000 if sold to the right person. So they are covering themselves in two different areas. Now we're going to repay the original finance of £100,000, and we can release cash of £300,000. Now, there are three things you can do with that cash. Two of them are boring. One of them is exciting. The first boring thing you can do with that cash is use it to pay the owner of the business. So in actual fact, we might use that to buy the business. Now, I suppose it's not too boring, but wait till you hear the third one. The second option that you can use that cash for is working capital, or it might be a combination of giving the owner of the business some money on exit and some working capital as well to grow the business. But the third thing you can do with that £300,000 is pay yourself what's called a deal fee. And everyone I know in my private client group who are buying businesses using asset finance are selecting deals where they can pay themselves a deal fee upon the refinance of the assets in the business. Now, this makes perfect sense because why would you not want to be paid money when you buy the business? You don't want to be paid money just when you own it or when you sell it. Why not add in a third leg to the stool and get paid when you buy it as well? So this is a great example of how you can use asset finance to buy the business, or at very least make what we call the initial consideration payment on the business. So that's asset-based finance. Very, very popular for acquisitions. Clearly, you only use that in a business that has good fixed assets, which is why you need several tricks up your sleeve for financing an acquisition, because not every business has assets like that. Now, an asset that some businesses have are trade debtors. So these are customers who owe them money. These are business customers who owe them money, and they are business customers that are within payment terms. So there aren't people who owe money from last year. They're people who owe money from the last 30 days or 60 days. Now, we can use invoice discounting to buy that business. So what we effectively do is we borrow against the outstanding debtors, the people who owe money to the business. We borrow against the outstanding debtors. And again, we can do 70, 75%, maybe even 80% of the outstanding debtors. And we can use that money to buy the business. I had a private client group last week. I was interviewing Ray. Part of that interview is going to make its way into a podcast over the next couple of months. And Ray was explaining to the audience how he's bought 3 companies in the last 6 months by using invoice discounting. So in each case, the company had decent quality B2B debtors, and he financed the debtors to give him the cash to buy the business. So very, very smart thing to do. Very straightforward thing to do as well. This isn't particularly, both asset finance and invoice discounting are normal things to do. You may only be coming across them for the first time tonight, but they are very, very standard funding processes when you're buying a business. The next one is cash flow financing. So cash flow financing is where you take a loan to buy the business based upon the strength of the cash flow in the business. Now, this really only works with a strong business with predictable cash flow that has a good history behind it. And the lender is often concerned that a change of ownership could disrupt the business, which is why keeping the owner on as a consultant always a decent idea in this case. Having an experienced management team who are going to be running the business, you having experience in the sector, that helps as well, because really all these things combine to give comfort to the lender that they are going to see their money repaid. It's possible there might be a personal guarantee on something like this. There typically isn't on invoice discounting and asset finance, but well, there may be. I mean, it all depends on the lender's requirements. And quite frankly, at the moment, those are changing week by week. Cash flow financing, more likely that a PG is required. So, excuse me. Oh, it's been a long day. Excuse me. Sorry. So the cash flow financing typically, though, requires you to put some money in. Again, it depends upon the lender. Banks pre-COVID were doing a 50% financing of the value of the business if you put in the other 50%, and that is effectively cash flow financing because it's based upon the strength of the cash flow of the business. So that's something to look at. Not one of my favorite methodologies because it's also usually quite expensive. I prefer the asset finance and the invoice discounting. CBILS, the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, only in the UK, but of course other countries I'm sure have their own have their equivalent of this. CBILS has just been extended to the end of November, so you've got like 7 weeks to get applications in on this. 7 weeks to do it. So you've got to move fast on this. And the criteria for CBILS were quite strict at the beginning. They were so strict, you may have heard on the news that no one was getting the loans. And now they've relaxed and relaxed and relaxed. And lenders are fawning over themselves to give CBILS loans now because 80% of it is underwritten by the bank. So their exposure is 20%. So if there is a default, all they've got to do is get back 20% of the money, which is a lot more comfortable for them. So you may be required to give a personal guarantee on the 20%. I believe that is not what is meant to happen, but it would certainly, I think, help your application if you showed a willingness to do that. So today we put in a CBILS application for 2.5 million. And with a lender, not a high street bank. And for that, we needed to produce a cash flow forecast and all those typical things that you would need to give a lender in order to borrow money in this way. I mean, with this invoice discounting, it's like these are the invoices. With asset finance, these are the assets. But CBILS and cash flow financing will look at the bigger picture. Now, there are other business interruption loan payments in the UK, like bounce back loans up to £50,000. And I know people who are very successfully using bounce back loans to buy companies. or at least partially fund the acquisition of the company. So I think that is something that's a small window of opportunity, but I would suggest that if you can get your accountant to put I didn't do all the cash flow and everything myself. I just got someone else to do it for me. And I'm happy to pay for that service quite simply because I wouldn't be very good at doing it myself. I'd rather get someone else to do it for me. So CBILS is a small window of opportunity, but I know people who are using it massively. For example, I've got someone in my group who got, what did he get? He had two businesses and Lloyds Bank gave him £250,000 in each business. So yeah, so we've got £500,000 of money. Now, the great advantage of CBILS is that for the first 12 months, the government pays the interest. And that means that basically you've got no repayments for a year. It's effectively free money for a year. And then it's a differing interest rates depending upon the lender. And you can go up to, I think actually it's 6 million on CBILS. So, you know, if you've got a track record, if you've got some credibility in the world of business, especially if you've got an existing business, you should be looking at getting in a CBILS application. And by the way, a very, acquiring businesses is an approved usage of CBILS money. Just so you know. So that's a good one. Vendor financing. Financing is a methodology by which effectively the seller of the business finances the sale of the business by allowing you to pay them over time. And vendor financing is a very popular phrase in the United States, less popular here. Some people turn their nose up at it because they feel that it is somehow cheating. It's almost like if you're going to buy a business, well, we want you to refinance your house and live on the breadline if you buy this business. I mean, that's just ridiculous. The brokers are incredibly snooty about this. They look down their nose at sellers at buyers who dare to suggest this is an acquisition method. Another reason why we don't go through brokers, as we said yesterday. And I'm thinking of, as I'm saying this, I'm actually thinking of 2 or 3 people in particular who really have this sort of, well, if you can't afford the business, you shouldn't buy it. I mean, who do they think they are? These are the people, by the way, who don't own any new businesses. They're just go-betweens. I mean, they don't own a business. And typically these brokerages aren't particularly successful anyway. So vendor financing, getting the vendor to finance the acquisition, is incredibly good way of leveraging a relationship that you've got with a vendor, and also effectively using the company's own money to buy itself. Now, let's just say that again. You're using the company's own money, to buy itself. What is wrong with that? I mean, that is the best thing ever, isn't it? So you've got to have everyone on board. I mean, the owner has to buy into this, and they have to have a certain degree of trust that you are going to pay them. But why would an owner do this? Why would an owner want to do this when they could have all the money on day one? Well, they probably tried that, and they may have tried that for a long period of time. They may have had the business on the market for a couple of years, and they've been waiting for someone to buy that business, and no one has turned up with a sack of cash. No one's done it. And then you come along and say, look, maybe the problem is flexibility. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we could buy this business from you as long as the deal structure supported us to buy it without us having to go to a bank. So if we go to a bank right now, the bank's playing hardball. They're just not lending right now. So if we can do something like this, then that means that you sell the business, we buy the business, you can at last close the door behind you and go and have a good long holiday. And then every month or every quarter, you look at your online banking and a sum of money has appeared in your bank and everyone's happy. You've sold, we've bought, you get paid. Because look, no one's given you that money. No one's given it to you up to now. We're going to give it to you. We're just going to give it to you over 2 or 3 or 4 years. But it's still the same amount of money. And quite frankly, if you're not going to go out and buy a Ferrari the next day, does it matter? If you don't need all that money in one go, and quite frankly, when you put the business on the market 2 years ago, you probably did think you needed it, but 2 years later, you haven't had it and you've survived, right? You've been all right without it. So let me just give you this in some numbers so you can see. You've agreed to buy the business on a 100% deferred basis. For example, the price agreed is £100,000. The deal structure is to pay this over 5 years at £5,000 a quarter, with the first quarter starting 90 days from completion. In other words, no money changes hands on day one. Okay. Now, there are variations of this where you can pay the owner some money on day one, maybe because you've refinanced the assets, or you've put finance invoice discounting against the debtor book. I actually agreed a purchase of a business today, and probably about an hour and a half ago, I got the text saying that it had been agreed, and I'll tell you what it was and the structure. So let me see if I can find the message, and I'll get all the details spot on. So let me just find this. So, right. Here we go. Right. So the original asking price, now we went direct to the owner, but then we discovered they were listed with a broker. So not ideal. So they, let me just find it here. Here it is. So it was with the broker for £275,000. Okay. And we said, we like the business, but absolutely no. They immediately dropped to £225,000. So we got a £50,000 discount just by saying no. And then that dropped again to, this is all in the last couple of weeks, to £175,000. And we have just agreed today to buy it for £100,000. We are paying £25,000 on completion. We are paying £37,500 on the first anniversary, so in 12 months' time. And we're paying £37,500 in 2 years' time on the second anniversary. So 75% of the purchase price is deferred into the end of year one and the end of year two. Where does that money coming from? From the trading of the business. Okay. Now, we're paying £25,000 on completion. You might think, well, that's all very well, Jonathan. I haven't got £25,000. Well, we do have £25,000, but I don't really want to spend £25,000. So what we will be doing is we'll be looking at what cash is in the business and whether that relates to work that hasn't yet been completed, whether it's so prepayments, if you like, whether that relates to deposits that are going to be returned at some point in the future. And I would imagine the business being the size that it is, and it does about 400,000 of annual revenue. And by the way, that would be making, if it's working the way we want it to work, £80,000 a year profit, £80,000 a year profit. So we're buying it for effectively 1.2 times net profit, post-tax profit. And so we're going to find most of that £25,000 in the bank account of the business that we are buying. So on completion, that becomes our money. We buy the assets rather than the shares. So they transfer that money to us, and then we just transfer it straight back to them for the completion payment. It sounds like black magic. I know it does, but that's how we do all of our things. So just because you're buying a business using vendor financing doesn't mean that you don't have any money. It just means you choose not to use your own money, because why would you when you can do it in a completely different way? Now, if you've got an existing business, and save your questions for later, we're going to do lots of Q&A tonight because this is a subject that's worthy of discussion. Leveraging your existing business. So if you have a business right now, you can leverage your existing business to buy another business. So, excuse me, I beg your pardon. So if you have an existing business and you want to buy another business, you know something, having a conversation with your bank manager about buying a business takes a pretty open-minded bank manager, because most bank managers have quite closed minds to this sort of thing. It's kind of not something they encounter very often, and as a result, they feel it's a sort of such a special situation. It's easier to say no to it than it is to say yes to it. But if you've got an existing business, I think it's quite normal to raise money for expansion and for growing the business. And you might want to borrow some money against your existing business. And when it comes to it, you decide that the best way to implement that expansion is actually to buy another business. I know many people right now who are using bounce back loans in businesses to buy another business. So you may have heard my example of Darren, who was on my fast track training program which is my Zoom training program in May, and he has now bought 16 businesses. The first business was a complete no money down deal. Once he had the company, once he owned the company, he took out a bounce back loan, used that to buy the next one, use that to buy the next one, and so forth. And he's done that 16 times. Okay, he's got 4 more to go before he thinks that he's got what he's going to get up until there's a cutoff in the UK. There's a cutoff on those loans again at the end of November. It's just a coronavirus support package. But he will own a group of 20 businesses doing 4.5 million revenue in the space of a few months. I mean, this is what you can do if you decide to do this. This is what you can do. Now, you might not want 20 businesses, but you might want one, right? You want it, by being on a program like this, you want at least one. Well, you could leverage your existing business to finance the acquisition of the next business. Now, it may take a while to get that finance in place, which is why I would be defaulting to vendor financing. Now, no money down deals. You might think, well, we've already covered this because you've talked about vendor financing, Jonathan. Well, yes and no. So vendor financing is only one way to buy a business without using any of your own cash. I've also touched on using, with the example of the one that I've agreed to do today, which is using the cash in the business to buy the business, and that and a combination of vendor financing. But you can also do what one of my clients did, and I know this because I looked it up this morning for something else. He was on episode 97 of the Business Buying Strategies podcast, Daniel. And Daniel Beaumont bought and I put something on LinkedIn about it this morning again, because that's how I have it in my mind, a 3 million revenue engineering business, making £400,000 a year profit, no money down. How did you do it? Well, the business owned a property, and the property was part of the sale. He didn't want the property. So he found a property investor to buy the property, and the money that was used, that came from the purchase of that property, was used as that initial consideration payment to the vendor. So on day one, they got a big chunk of money. I can't recall the exact amount. I'm sure it's on the podcast, but he got a big sum of money on day one. So the owner's happy. And then Daniel paid for the business out of cash flow over, I think it was 4 years. It may have been 5. So with none of his own money, he acquired a 3 million revenue business doing £400,000 a year profit. Now, if that is the one business that you buy, that means that clearly for a period of time, you've got to pay the owner, but you typically only pay 50% of your profit over, because you want to keep 50% back for yourself. So the first 3 or 4 years, you only make £200,000 a year. But then on the year after you've paid the vendor everything that you owe him, you've now gone back up to £400,000 a year with none of your own money in. I mean, who wouldn't do that? Do you see how I think it's always a little bit crazy when people refinance their family house, sign personal guarantees to borrow money to buy businesses when you don't have to? You don't have to do it. You can do no money down deals. So those are my 7 methodologies for funding an acquisition. These are the main ones that we mix and match. But I also want to give you 5 things to remember. There are 5 things I want you to remember. The first is you don't want to use your own cash to buy the business. Your bank balance is designed to go up rather than down. So do not use your own cash to buy the business. Number 2, you do not want to run the business day to day. Remember, you are not creating a job for yourself. Really important to remember that. I think sometimes it's too easy to get sucked in. You go in one day a week and everyone says, oh, it's great when having you around. You should come in more often. So you go in a couple of days a week, and before you know it, you've got an office and you've got a desk in the office and you're there 5 days a week. Number 3 is you want to be able to take cash out of the business every month. So you want to make sure you buy a business that has sufficient cash flow to pay off any financing, vendor financing, asset financing, and so forth. But you can take money out of it every single month. Sometimes people ask, how much money? Well, the profit's yours. You can take out all the profit. So all the profit post-tax, take that out. That's your money. Number 4, it's very important that you want to buy the business low so you can sell high. And some people call me a bargain hunter, and in a way I am, and I'm not ashamed of that, because I know that if I can buy low, I can sell later on and make more money in the interim than if I bought high, and therefore I've got to sell even higher. Or worse, I buy high and something happens and I've got to sell low and I lose money in the middle. I mean, that's just not a good thing at all. And number 5, you want to find ugly businesses and make beautiful profits. I love that. You want to find ugly businesses and make beautiful profits. See, don't go after the app development and the latest bit of technology and the things that are kind of exciting, sexy businesses. You want to find kind of boring, dull businesses that just make money every single month and every single year. Businesses that kind of people don't even notice, don't even know exist, but just behind the scenes are making money every single month. So let's do some questions, shall we? I want to answer your questions on this. Oh, by the way, the link for this playlist of videos, of recordings, was sent to everyone this morning. So today's video will be there tomorrow. Wednesday's video will be there Thursday. Stephen Hackett says, I'm an ex-bank manager, and you're right. They do have closed minds. It's drilled into them in training. Absolutely, Stephen. Yeah, absolutely. So you want to keep any funding application just a little bit boring. Don't get all entrepreneurial about it. Otherwise, it's you're not the careful, cautious client that they prefer. Andy says, what was number 1 again? Goodness. Well, number 1 right at the beginning was asset finance. You'll be able to watch, if you missed the beginning, Andy, you'll be able to watch it on the video when you've got that tomorrow. Okay. CBILS, can this be done by a sole trader, and can it be transferred to the new owner? I don't know the answer, but yeah, well, no, I'll tell you the difficult thing here is that in you buy a business from a sole trader, you're buying the assets. So no, I think the answer is no. I mean, you should always take a professional's advice. I mean, I'm no expert on a government scheme that only came out a few months ago. I mean, yeah, you need to find someone who is, but you need to be buying a company, and then the company gets the CBILS or the bounce back loan. And then of course that is transferred. So one of the businesses that we completed on last Wednesday, they took out a bounce back loan prior to completion of £50,000, and we used that as part of the completion part of the completion money. Bukola says, examples of sectors with ugly businesses that make beautiful profits. Well, really what I said, I mean, it's going to be businesses that kind of just produce, I mean, I think I mentioned dry cleaners yesterday. Dry cleaners, not that exciting. You know, you won't find the dinner party conversation that exhilarating when you tell people you own a chain of dry cleaners. But hey, that's not what it's about. What it's about is you've got good recurring profits. Ishan says, Jonathan, glad you said people feel like you are cheating if you use vendor finance. I found it tough to convince sellers so far. Yeah, well, that's a different thing. That's why deal flow is important, I suppose. Yes, it is. But in order to get people to agree to effectively defer the payment for the business, you have to have a lot of authority and a lot of credibility. A lot of authority and a lot of credibility. Yes, Stephen. A lot of authority and a lot of credibility. Because if they do not believe in you, then it will not happen. It really is as simple as that. Ishan says, is invoice discounting the same as invoice factoring? No, there is a very subtle difference. And I need to get this around the right way. Confidential invoice, CID, confidential invoice discounting. The customer does not know that you are financing those invoices. With factoring, they do, because they have to pay the factoring company rather. So they pay their invoice. When they pay their invoice, they pay the factoring company. They don't pay you. That is the so the difference is who they pay. One's confidential, they don't know, and one isn't. Cash flow financing, is this the same as royalty financing? I don't know, Stephen. I've never heard the phrase royalty financing. I don't know. It's not a phrase I've ever come across, which is unusual. It's either some sort of new thing or it's something very very specialized. Toyin says, with invoice discounting, you're releasing cash against future payments owed to you by the business. Yeah, so you're releasing money from your debtors. So if the money is taken out to pay the seller on day one, how do you manage the cash position of the business on day-to-day basis post-exit? Very carefully. Very, very carefully is the answer. Yeah, very carefully. Kevin says, what type of funding would work buying distressed businesses through insolvency practitioners? Good question, Kevin. So the answer is this. When you're buying a business from an insolvency practitioner, money talks, because they want certainty of transaction. They don't want to hear that you're going to buy the business. Great, they've got a buyer for these assets. And then you say, oh, but I need to go and borrow the money. And they go, oh, well, that's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen quickly. So in terms of using financing to buy assets from an administrator, you need to be a pretty serious player with some serious credibility and preferably a pre-existing relationship with a lender. So you can go to them and say, okay, let's look at it like this. Let's say you are let's say that, and I know not many people like him, but let's say you're Mike Ashley and you're going to be buying a business from administration. Mike Ashley's FD phones a lender and says, look, we're buying these assets. We want finance against them, but you've got to do it in 48 hours. You know, they'll sit up and take notice. It'll be a decent enough amount for them to make a serious amount of interest on. That's completely different to someone who is unknown phoning that lender. So that, again, that credibility is important. Now, in the absence of you being famous, you've got to work with what you've got, which is potentially building relationships with lenders, borrowing small amounts, paying it back, borrowing small amounts, paying it back. So you're kind of ready for that situation where you need to move very, very quickly. Hi, Daniel. Daniel says, would it be best for the owner to add you to the bank accounts before completion to help ease transition and speed up financing? Well, I kind of know what you mean, but I've got a better way of doing it. We actually sit down with the owner of the business as soon as we've completed, and we get them to log on, and we then go into the accounts and change the password so that they can't log on, but we can. So we do it the same day of completion. David says, if I agree on the price and terms with the lender, if I agree on the price and terms with the seller, and I put some money down and I borrow from the bank, at what time of the process would the bank want to see the proof of fund? What, the bit that you're going to put in? Well, I would imagine that they want to see the bit that you put in. Depends on the bank, but in conjunction with the funding application. If you're asking them to finance 50%, they kind of need to know that you've got the other 50%. Clearly, if you're doing it with your own bank, they know what you have on account. So that makes it just a little bit easier. Ishan says, how do you pay the seller upon completion? Let me just read this again. How do you pay the seller upon completion by refinancing assets? Will there not be a time delay as you can't refinance the assets before you own them? No, is the answer. There isn't any time delay. It's a little bit like, I want to buy a house. How can I get a mortgage on a house that I don't own? Well, I can have a mortgage offer, and then on completion, funds can be drawn down and drawn down and transferred or held to order at the point of completion. So it's no different to buying a property and getting a mortgage. You're buying a business and getting finance on assets. It's no different. It's no different at all. So there isn't any time delay, and the money is released, and then the money flows from the solicitors. So from the finance company to the solicitors, from the solicitors through to the vendor, the seller of the business. It's a good question, and actually, it's a question I'm asked a lot. So it is a very good question. So the mortgage example makes perfect sense. It's like, can I get a mortgage offer on your house, Ishan? Yes, I can. Can I get a mortgage offer on your house without you even knowing I'm getting a mortgage offer on your house? Yes, I can. Not much good to me and unless you sign the sale contract, but I can get a mortgage offer on your house right now, and you wouldn't even know. So I can get finance on the assets of your business, Ishan, and you wouldn't even know. Well, you probably would, because you had to supply me with all the serial numbers, and someone's come around to have a poke around to look to see if the assets truly exist. They've looked to see if they exist. So it's not the perfect analogy, but it's a pretty good analogy, I think. Hi, Andy Norris. Is there a tax benefit to the seller to take cash out of the business as part of the sale rather than as a dividend? 100% there is. Well, there is until Entrepreneurs Relief is completely disbanded. It came from 10 million, which was lovely for people, down to 1 million, and it is about to go altogether. I'm sure it is in the March. I think the budget's in March or April next year. So if they take the cash out of the business as a pre-sale dividend, they then, depending on their personal tax situation and various other things, they've got to pay a decent sum of tax on that. However, if the cash is paid to them as part of the funding for the business, part of the purchase price of the business, then they can, at the moment, if it's less than 1 million and they haven't used up their allowance, their 1 million band allowance, they can take a 10% relief on that. So they only pay 10% tax on that. That's a really good question, Andy. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I don't have any more questions sitting here. Send me some more questions. Maria reminds me to say that the playlist was sent out to everyone this morning for the recording of yesterday and recording for today. Giovanni says, how can I get a fee when buying a business? A deal fee. well, you get a deal fee by doing this. That's one way of getting a deal fee. You get your deal fee by refinancing the assets. That's a fast way of doing it. You can get a deal fee by buying a business that has debtors who owe the business money, and refinancing the debtors, but not giving all of it to the vendor. So you don't need to give all of it to the vendor, and some of it is yours. So there's two methods we mentioned this evening. Ishan says, if the seller is being stubborn and not accepting deferred terms, for example, when should you just walk away? Well, I don't know when, but you should just walk away, because why not? Why would you stick around? Yeah, it's like I don't know. Dating analogies work quite well when it comes to this type of scenario. You know, you've asked someone out, they've said no. You've asked someone out, they said no. You keep asking them out, they keep saying no. Well, at some point, just move on. Yeah, there's no point hitting your head against a brick wall. Why would you stick around? You know, why would you do that? There's no reason for doing that at all. Stephen says, would you be happy running through a potential deal structure for the high turnover one that I mentioned? If you send me if you type up a bit of a message in the next few minutes, I'll certainly take a look at it for you, Stephen, because you haven't really given me any information. You said that it's 1.3 million turnover, but that's all you've said. I don't know what the business or the individual owns that's part of the business in terms of assets. I don't know anything about the debtors. I don't know what their expectations are. So give me as much information as possible. You just got a few minutes to do that. What's this question here? Would you take a deal fee from an overdraft and leave the business in a negative cash position? Yes. Bought a business last Monday with a 30,000 overdraft, but not used it. Yeah, absolutely. As long as you've got sufficient trade in the business to make sure you don't go into over the agreed overdraft limit. I'm surprised. So the answer is yes. Take out £25,000. It's yours. Yeah, it's the company money. It's your money. It's the company's facility. So to take out. But I'm very surprised that overdraft facility was left, because typically if there's an overdraft facility, there is a charge against the company. And remember, you need the charge holder's permission. So I've just realized that I was doing this with a different group on the training course after this one today. And I was just thinking, hang on, I told you this morning. It wasn't you guys, was it? It was someone else. So of course, if there's a charge against the business, the charge holder needs to give permission for the business to be sold. So typically the bank would say, we want either repayment of the overdraft, or we want to close the overdraft, or you need to PG the overdraft. And clearly that didn't happen in any of those circumstances. So I'm not quite sure how you got away with that. You flew under the radar on that one. Hi Waters, could you please shed some light on no money down deals in details? I've gone into as much detail as I can today, but Waters, I know that you're on the fast track program. We do a whole day on that. So you're going to get loads of that. Okay, so if you can just hold on for that, you'll get loads of information on that. David says, what is the current usual interest rate and length with seller financing? Well, the length, so how long you pay for, is completely down to negotiation. It can be 12 months, it can be 10 years. It completely depends. It's a point of negotiation. And with the usual interest rate, I'd never be offering an interest rate. But if you do offer an interest rate, then it has to be above what they would get if it was in the bank, because that's their incentive, or part of their incentive for doing it. Okay, so no problem, Waters. Happy to help you. Okay, so Stephen says 1.3 million turnover, 87,000 net profit, wholesale business, 50,000 assets, agreed to pay £150,000. So effectively two times annual revenue. Not happy with deferred as they've been burnt in the past. Okay, well then you've got to make them happy, Stephen. It's as simple as that. Stephen, I don't know whether you're on the fast track because we spend half of one of the sessions on this very subject. Just type me a message. Let me know if you're on the fast track, because if you are, I'll look out for you on that, and I'll guide you through it on that. Okay, all right, you're not yet. Okay, fine. Okay. Toyin says, what if the owner asks for a PG on seller finance? How do you get around it? I've got 5 ways to get around it. But typically, if they're asking you for a PG, they don't trust you. You've done something wrong. You've done something to break their trust. You don't yet have, because you haven't displayed sufficient authority and confidence and credibility for them to. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're selling. You've got a small business. You're selling it to Theo Paphitis from Dragon's Den, or I'm just picking well-known people, Duncan Ballantyne or Peter Jones. Would you ask them for a personal guarantee? You wouldn't dare, would you? You wouldn't dare do it, because you'd be insulting them, because they've got authority and they've got credibility. Okay. Now, it doesn't matter that they've got the money and they have the ability to pay you, it's whether they have the will to pay you. That's what really counts. Okay. So if you're being asked for a PG, you've got something wrong with your positioning right at the beginning. Ishan, I've got to give you the award for the most asked questions on any training program I've ever delivered by Zoom. Ishan, you need to get yourself on the fast track. You're clearly serious about this. I mean, you just bought a business last week. You've got an overdraft of £30,000. Yeah, for £799. Get yourself on the fast track, and you got me for an entire week in a lot more depth than we're covering in the time that we've got here. But you asked me this very good question that I'm going to answer for everyone's benefit. Is there any limit to how many businesses you can buy with these creative finance methods? The amount of money you have doesn't seem to be a limit. You are spot on, Ishan. And if other people haven't realized that, let me just read that out, because I want the penny to drop here. Is there any limit to how many businesses you can buy with these creative finance methods? The amount of money you have doesn't seem to be a limit. Correct. If the amount of money you have is the limit, then you're going to get stuck at 1 or 2 businesses, right? Or maybe not even get off the starting blocks at all. If the amount of money you have does not limit you, i.e. it does not stop you from buying businesses, then yeah, the sky is the limit. So people hold themselves back because they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the confidence. Ishan, so you bought 3 businesses so far. Raised £50,000 from a bounce back loan on Friday from the new business bought on Monday. Speaking to another seller tomorrow as well. I love it. Great. So get yourself in the training and let's sharpen up those skills that you clearly already have intuitively, but let's sharpen them up and start doing bigger deals. Sounds absolutely fantastic what you've done. Well done. Congratulations. But let's take it up to the next level. David says, your advice is not to run the business. Do you have a tool or a website to recommend to see what the usual salaries for a general manager, CEO in such and such an industry, so we anticipate the expense of the replacement? I thought, yep, Indeed.com. Just go on Indeed, the job website. Go on Indeed, the job website. Type in the area. Type in the job, and you will see what other people are offering for that job. Instant market research done in the blink of an eye. Okay. I haven't got any more questions. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds. If you want to ask a question, I will be happy to answer it. Go right ahead. Anything you want to ask me, just ask. No problem, David. No problem at all. Happy to help. See, this is the thing. I mean, sometimes you have a question like, how do I work out what a manager is going to be paid in a food distribution business in Scarborough? Oh my goodness, how would you ever know that? my answer instantly, this is what you need to do. And that is what you get when you pay for education. I know some people don't believe in education, but when you pay for education, that's the sort of the shortcuts that you get. You don't have to figure it out for yourself. You've got someone who can tell you based upon their experience how it works. Thank you, Tony, for that lovely comment. So any other questions that you would like to ask me, feel free to go ahead. No questions? Are you sure? We've just had one pop through. There's always one at the last minute. David Hegarty says, is it best to build relationships with finance brokers via LinkedIn before trying to get finance started? Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, they don't really care. They just want to sell finance and get a fee. So they don't really care about relationships apart from, I'm just thinking of a guy that I'm using here in Richmond upon Thames, where I live. And he saw me do a video on LinkedIn and said, I know where you're standing. I recognize that spot. And we got talking, and he's just doing a finance package for me that hopefully we'll draw down on in the next week or so. So that just came from a random LinkedIn thing. Yeah. So absolutely, LinkedIn is a really good way of starting relationships, and then you foster them sort of in real life, as it were. So let's do the sales pitch. If you haven't joined me for the Fast Track program, I'm only doing 2 more this year. Pressure of work actually means I'm only doing 2 more this year. So stick around if you want to find out how to join that. By now, I hope you would be convinced that £799 plus the VAT is a small price to pay to get to learn how to do this properly and correctly. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot more to it than just the 60 minutes that we've chatted the last 2 nights. So the question is, what if I was your business buying mentor? I taught you what I know, and we did it by video meeting, so you don't have to travel anywhere. And I did it for a fraction of the £12,000 mastermind program. Now, the Fast Track program is £799 plus VAT, and it is the same teaching content as my £12,000 mastermind program that I've been running for several years. Okay, it's the same teaching content, but delivered by Zoom to lots and lots of people at the same time. It's a 5-day program, and people like Ray that I mentioned yesterday, and this is Ray's story in case you missed it yesterday, were on that program in May. He's bought 3 businesses, totaling 3.4 million of annual revenue without spending a penny of his own money, using the financing methods that we've been talking about today. Okay. Check him out on the Business Buying Strategies podcast. Darren, 16 businesses in 16 weeks. Again, here's his story. He did it all using the methodology that I've been teaching you. Could someone go from not knowing anything about buying a business to buying 16 in 16 weeks? Well, he didn't know anything about buying a business until he came on the Fast Track training in May, came along the 5-day training. This program is for several types of people. Effectively, it's for people who don't want to waste time trying to figure it out, and people who want to get there quickly, but maybe don't have any experience or have some experience, but want to up their game considerably. It's a live program, which is why I'm only doing it twice more this year. It is not pre-recorded, and there are only 2 more courses this year. Plus, I'm going to be helping you before and after each of the live training sessions and answering your questions. And people say all sorts of nice things about it. There's about 80 testimonials like this on my LinkedIn profile. So go and have a look at my LinkedIn profile. There's about 80 testimonials from people who have been on the program. On Monday, we'll get the strategy right. We'll find the businesses to buy, and I'll give you all the scripting you need. On Tuesday, buying a business out of administration, negotiating the price and valuing the business. On Wednesday, 6 ways to buy a business without using your own cash. That's what you were asking me about earlier, Walters, deciding whether to buy assets or shares and getting a corporate structure of holding company and SPVs and your targets and how to hive up assets and all of these sorts of things right on Wednesday. On Thursday, getting to head to terms without a lawyer, everything you need to know about the legal and accountancy process of buying a business and then getting a deal to completion. On Friday, what happens after you bought the business, how to make it profitable, how to make money out of the business that you've bought. This works wherever you are in the world. Ali's in the United Arab Emirates. Your total investment is £799 plus VAT. Jerome, for example, is in the Netherlands. And I'm going to give you 3 big bonuses as well. The first resource is 32 videos of me doing real life deal negotiations. Resource 2 is a set of contracts and checklists. It will save you an awful lot of time. It will save you way more money. I mean, just one of these contracts alone, I might have paid £4,500, £5,500 for. I'm going to do a live event next year with everyone who's been on the Fast Track program. At the moment, that is, I wouldn't be surprised if by the latter part of next year, when we're allowed to do it, we'll have about 500 people there. It's going to be a great conference. And also, I'm going to give you all the videos of the 5 days of training as a resource library, so you get that all together. So the total price, the special price when you put all the resources and the training together, is £799 plus VAT. And quite frankly, if you think that's expensive, you are being tight because this is an absolute bargain. If you are serious about doing this, you won't get a lawyer to look at your heads of terms agreement for less than £799. I'm also going to give you the resource that money can't buy, which is the letter that I use to source all of my deals. Remember yesterday I said that was my favorite deal sourcing method. It is my favorite deal sourcing method. Don't need to write a letter yourself. You can, Bukola, yeah, we kind of do a community thing, but not so much on the Fast Track training, because that's not really what it's about. The Fast Track training is about learning from me. Quite frankly, learning from each other doesn't really work at that level, because it would be the blind leading the blind. Okay, so I understand your question, but the Fast Track I want to give you is the education. It's not a sort of a social group, really. It's about getting an education, which I'm sure, well, I know it works really, really well. So there's no point going out there and trying to write letters yourself to find businesses to buy. Use the 2 that I use to get all the deals, including the one that I agreed today. In fact, that came from a letter as well. So the dealmakersacademy.com/fast. If you've got any questions, now is the time to ask. And if you register before 10 o'clock this evening, I will do a Zoom one-to-one with you in order to get your strategy right, help you on a one-to-one basis, and get you really focused on what you need to do to be super successful at buying businesses. But that's only if you register before 10 o'clock this evening. So thank you very much for your attention tonight. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. The dates for the course, Ishan, if you just type into your browser, the dealmakersacademy.com/fast, you'll have the 2 final dates of the year. They're all on that page. The dates are all there. The times are all there. Everything you need to register is there. Okay. So go to the dealmakersacademy.com/fast and you will find it all there. Ishan, if you're registering tonight, and it sounds like you are, then Maria in my office will organize a one-to-one between you and me. And we will sit down on a Zoom and I will help you with whatever help you need. It sounds like you're doing great, but I'm sure we can sharpen up some of those deal structures for you. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. If you've got any questions, now is the time to ask in the next few seconds, or forever hold your peace, well, at least until tomorrow. But if you register before 10 o'clock tonight, you're going to get a private one-to-one Zoom with me. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your attention. I will see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock when we talk about fixing and we talk about flipping. So we talk about fixing the business and flipping the business. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you very, very much indeed. And I will